Welcome into the OBR streaming network. This is a brand new edition of Things I Think I Know About the Cleveland Browns. My name is Brad Ward. I am here with my esteemed panel as always. Next to me, Quincy Carrier. Follow him on Twitter at Quen_C. And of course, Abby Mueller at Abby_Mueller_. What's going on, guys? How we doing this week? Ending the week of shows here on the OBR streaming network is always interesting. Lots to talk about. Miles has been discussed at great length. Shador is going to have his first visit with the Browns. A lot going on as usual. Anything you guys want to get off your mind here with this microphone in front of you?
You know, I've done my third appearance on the OBR video network this week. I feel like Brad Ward right now, just up on everything.
Right.
I watched the show on OBR Weekly. You did a great job, Quincy, breaking down quarterbacks. It was a good show. Excellently done. And Abby, of course, knocking out her shorts as always. So you guys are all over the network. Appreciate it. Tonight we're doing Dream Quarterback Room 2025. Dream within the realm of realistic. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, and feel free to drop your comments in the chat as we go through these scenarios. Who do we start with tonight? Anybody want to start? Abby, why don't you go first tonight with your Dream Quarterback Room 2025 Cleveland Browns? What's it look like? 1 through 3, 4, whatever you. Go ahead.
I feel like we need the showcase music from like Wheel of Fortune, right?
Yes. Or we can have like the draft music, like with the first pick, and
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
I might have that somewhere.
It's funny because we were saying right before this, like it feels like there's so many options, but at the same time, when you look at all the options, you kind of don't feel incredible about anything. There's definitely been better off seasons in the history of the NFL where you're like, okay, you need a quarterback, you can try to make something happen.
You got new car dreams, but used car money.
Yeah, no, literally. It's it feels a little bleak out here. So kind of hard to put together a list I was really excited about, but in staying in the realistic world, the list I came up with was Sam Darnold, Justin Fields, and then drafting Will Howard. Okay, so to kind of like go through my thoughts, I'll go one by one, and maybe you guys can give me your thoughts on each of them, on just like my reasoning for each of those guys. So starting with Sam Darnold, obviously like the money is going to be the biggest reason that this could maybe not happen. The Browns aren't in a great position money wise. Obviously there's, going to be money moved still, so they could make room for it if that's something they really wanted to do. I'm curious to see what the market's going to end up being like because of his playoff performance being a little bit worse than what he was doing in the regular season. It, for a while felt unrealistic that the Browns could be in that market. But after he struggled in the playoffs, I was like, okay, maybe there's a world where, they can be able to afford him. He's had success in offenses similar to Stefanski's, so I think it's a fit in that sense. And, I feel like it gives them a better chance than others of being able to win now compared to some other developmental type pieces that they could bring in. So that's kind of my thoughts on Sam Darnold, but curious what you guys feel about him.
Listen, I think you're on track with the choice of the player. My concern here is that I don't think he leaves Minnesota.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I don't know what's going to happen. And if he does hit the market, it's certainly very intriguing. What kind of market develops for him, I don't know.
Yep.
That will matter how much money, right? But I just can't imagine. I think Minnesota maybe the one thing that's out there is like maybe Kevin O'Connell thinks he like is the man and it doesn't matter who it is. Like maybe he thinks he can do the same thing with whoever he has as a backup. You know what I mean? Like he's the magic man. And it was him more than it was Sam.
To be fair to that point, right? He did have you guys believing it, like not you guys specifically, but people on the internet believing that like the Browns make this massive mistake letting Josh Dobbs go. Right?
Yeah.
Great.
For sure.
Great point. So to that point, there may be some truth to it too. I do think he is a good coach. So, and they have the what's his name under contract, right? Or he's not under contract, but
JJ McCarthy.
Well, not JJ. Who was their backup? They signed.
Daniel Jones is going to be
Daniel
a free
Jones.
agent.
Daniel Jones.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so maybe he thinks he can do the same thing with Daniel Jones and not pay the. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
However, I ultimately think if they were smart and Quincy were smart, they would franchise tag him for 1 year and let JJ get back to give him a year to get healthy before they put him in that role.
I think them going after Daniel Jones and trying to like keep him in the ecosystem, that tells me a lot about what they're going to do going forward, because Daniel Jones, very similar skill set to JJ McCarthy, both really athletic guys kind of known for their ability to move. They need to work on their ability as passers. So I think they're going to go full get ahead with their top 10 pick. Remember, like if this dude were healthy, he would have played this season at some point, right? Because top 10 picks always play. So I don't think the plan is, hey, we want to pay a bunch of money for a guy that more than likely we project to be on the bench, right? So I think that Darnold's probably going to hit the open market, and it makes sense for Darnold to want to hit the open market too, because he probably wants to go somewhere where he can be the man, and not have to worry about when are they going to finally put the future in and replace me. And then who knows how long I'm on the bench if I signed a long-term contract if I'm Sam Darnold there. So yeah, I think Darnold's probably going to want to hit the open market. I don't know what his market's going to look like. I have been bearish, right? Not bullish, bearish on his market for a while. I think I saw like this giant thread in the OBR Browns banter chat when somebody said it was $45 million for him. I'm like, you know what? It ain't getting over like 15 guaranteed, maybe 30 with incentives, right? Like, I just don't buy that teams are going to jump over themselves to sign Sam Darnold, especially where if you give him enough money, you're taking yourself out of like a couple of draft classes here. So I don't mind. Like Sam Darnold, it really does matter with the money. I also just have the question of like, how much do we trust Sam Darnold to translate any of that success over to Cleveland? And maybe I've just been a Browns fan too long, but it feel like Sam Darnold, one of them dudes you sign and they end up like Jeff Garcia, right? Like it's like, oh, well, he looked good, right? And maybe that's just the Browns fan in me getting the better of me. Right. Yeah. But it's just, there's something I don't trust about Sam Darnold just now figuring it out. When we saw him play 2 years ago in Carolina, and he got benched for PJ Walker. So I'm just
the interesting part about that thought is like, okay, so Kevin O'Connell makes quarterback look offense look good in the, so, and it's his first year of real success. So like, you're right to question that, right? Like, is it sustainable someplace else?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about it is that makes me second guess maybe it could be real is he did kind of do an internship year in San Francisco under Kyle Shanahan. So like what did he learn there and pick up there, that combined with O'Connell? Or is it just the great wide receivers and the great offense that they have in Minnesota? It's like you got to separate the two, figure out what is what and what will it be for you. It's hard
if he had spent 3-4 years in San Francisco, I might buy it, right?
Maybe,
but we're talking about a guy who has a like very long track record of like making these mistakes and kind of crumbling under pressure. And then like it's kind of like when they did this with Mitch Trubisky, where it's like, well, he spent a year behind Josh Allen, so now he's good. I'm like, maybe we're just less exposed to him. And if we get overexposed to Sam Darnold in the way that we were, some of these issues are going to pop up again. And I mean, we saw some of these things pop up in his last 2 games as a starter out there in Minnesota. So I wouldn't take that out the realm of possibility that it's like, hey, maybe Sam's not where we thought he was, and maybe it was a bit of an illusion there. And he's going to play closer to backup level play. Sam, I feel like gonna give you $10 million worth of quarterback. How much you pay for that? The mileage may vary, but I just that's where I get hesitant on. It's like, okay, Sam Darnold for $20 million. I guess you could sell me on that, right? $30 million. All right, whatever.
See, I think
right?
it's getting to 30. I think
But
teams are thirsty enough,
Yeah.
and there's a lack of options enough this year that somebody without a high enough draft pick is going to pay him 30.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so hard is the lack of other available options where like in any other year that might not drive the market up, but it is hard.
If he gets loose. Now bear with me on this last thought on Minnesota. I saw JJ McCarthy on the sidelines, and he looked thin and very thin and unhealthy in the playoff game on the sidelines. Now, can he get that back in 1 year? Maybe. But I worry about my concern there that's when I thought, man, they're going to have to keep Sam around, and maybe they won't keep Sam around. Maybe they'll just keep, somebody else around, to your point, Daniel Jones or whatever, and go all in on that and not pay him. But like for them to go 40 million on the books and off the books in 1 year is not that bad if it's a franchise tag, right? Like they're just going to pay it 1 year and it'll be off the books the next, and they'll be on to a rookie quarterback. So it's possible to do, and it's not that punitive, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible for them to do it. I definitely think it's in a range of outcomes for the Minnesota Vikings. I just, realistically speaking, I think they have to feel like this next year is going to have to be on the back of whatever they have there in JJ, right? Like you spun a top 10 pick on him. And to the point about quarterback availability, this is a weird year where like there's not a ton of like quarterbacks available, but there are a lot of familiar names that are going to hit the market, right? Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, more than likely Kirk Cousins is going to hit the market here. So there will be names that, teams are going to look at if the price gets too high for Sam Darnold and says, hey man, if we need a guy for a year, let's kick the tires on Aaron Rodgers. Let's kick the tires on Russell Wilson or somebody like that. Let's see if we can revive Zach Wilson, who spun a year, who was a number 2 overall pick out there in Denver. So I wouldn't underestimate the effect that might have negatively on Sam Darnold's market, given that if you're looking for a name that will make you feel better about quarterback for at least a couple of months until they play, that's going to be there this offseason, right? There's going to be a lot for him to compete with. And another thing to consider, seems 5 teams took a quarterback last year. There's just not a lot of teams looking for quarterback right now.
I think it's valid that there are like some bigger names out there. I feel like the reason it feels like the market is so much less is because when a couple of years ago, a lot of those guys were available or in the conversation, like the Russell Wilsons, the Kirk Cousins, they were a little bit younger, a little less injured. So now it just feels, I guess, bleaker when you look at kind of that same group of people, but
they're not the answer anymore, right? But they could be
for like a year for a team to be like, yeah, we just need a guy for a year. We could take one of these guys. I agree with that point. It's
a very tainted group of like all the quarterbacks available. None of them are clean. They have all had, they're aging or they've had a bad year here or they had an injury here. There's always a buddy that
you're not doing laser eye Andrew Berry memes for any of these signings, right? Like that's just where the market is. But there are signings here where I'm like, somebody's going to be able to sign somebody at quarterback this year who's going to give them a decent year, right? Like, like similar to what Russ gave Pittsburgh, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Who else you got in the room?
Yeah. So my second one was Justin Fields. So I think there's more opportunity this season than there was last season for the Browns to potentially make a move for him, mainly because I think previously they were not going to touch that with the whole fact that Deshaun Watson's agent is the same as Justin Fields' agent. It felt like there were a lot of rumblings there on like that was just not something they were going to mess with, but I don't think they necessarily care about Deshaun Watson's feelings anymore. So that's probably not going to be an issue. Look, I don't know how I would feel about Justin Fields as the starter for this team. I think he could be a potential useful backup, almost in a similar way that they used him in Pittsburgh, where you could bring him in for certain packages. It doesn't have to be everything. I think Tommy Rees has, familiarity with an offense with a quarterback like Fields when he was in Alabama with Milroe. So I think there's some things that I think that could work there. And, maybe if you have Darnold and him both in that quarterback room, they can kind of both be useful for different things. And that there's some upside there. Thoughts on Justin Fields?
Yeah, I mean, I have some intrigue in what Fields can bring. He can't be my number one choice, though. I'm with you. Like, he has to be a guy that either wins the job from somebody else in camp, or he's your backup. But like for me, he's not my number one option ever. But I have no problem in having him in the room. I'm interested to hear what Quincy says.
Yeah, I've been low on Justin Fields since he's come out of Ohio State. Like, I've never really believed in him as an NFL prospect. The thing with Justin is, like, if you ask him to do like a couple of things, he could do those things well, which I think makes him a backup in the NFL. Mm-hmm. The issue with Justin, and I think it's a similar issue that people fell into with Jameis, is you're gonna always believe you can fix it. Right, like you're gonna always try to talk at yourself because you're gonna see Justin Fields, and he's 6'5", and he's bigger than you think, and he runs super fast, and you're like, man, if he could just get this right, if he could just see the middle of the field a little bit clear, if we could just get him to read half the field a little bit faster, like it would be spectacular. But there have been many coaches that have tried and failed with Justin there. So, yeah, as long as you're not bringing him in and saying this is our solution, this is going to be our answer, I think you're in a good place. Because if your starter does go down, he is somebody who could play for an extended period of time. And depending on how good the team is around him, can survive, right, as the starter, especially if he has a wide receiver to go to.
Yeah. I'm with you there.
All valid. Okay, my third one, actually now I'm realizing 2 of my 3 are Ohio State quarterbacks, so I feel like there's some bias that's coming through in all of this. But Will Howard, I'm not really interested in drafting a quarterback in the first round of this draft. I think, it's going to make the most sense to go free agent market and then draft in day 2 or day 3 type picks. And I went with Will Howard. I don't know where he's going to end up going in the draft, to be quite honest. I feel like he's going to be on a wide range of people's draft boards on day 2 and day 3. Like, it's kind of hard.
I think he's a day 2 pick now. I think he ends up being a day 2 pick.
I think so too. I feel like that national championship performance just had him on a lot more people's radars than he was before. And obviously that fluctuates with the combine, and over the weeks, I'm sure we'll hear like 100 different things about what people think of him. But that's where I'd like the Browns to be picking a quarterback in this draft. I feel like, the upside for him is size and athleticism. He has some of those similar things, I guess, in with the athleticism to Fields, with his ability to run there, which would be nice to see. Seems like a good kid, a good leader, I think someone that fans would be able to get behind, which is always nice. I think, the concerns with him are some of those bigger mistakes that he made. And, was he just good because he was playing with guys like Jeremiah Smith and, the talented receivers that Ohio State has, or will some of that be able to transfer over to the NFL? Obviously when you're taking a quarterback in those rounds, you're not expecting him to be completely NFL ready, but I like the potential there for them to, maybe develop as a backup for the coming years. So went with my Buckeye, Will Howard.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I like Will. I think that he is a day 2 pick. I think somebody will bite on him before we get to day 3. I do think my concern is the arm strength.
Yep.
Although I do think, Ohio State found ways to, using him in the boot game and stuff like that to shorten some of the fields and the throws. There's ways you can kind of battle that. He's your third quarterback, so it's not, a huge issue. I do think, his performance in the playoffs, his processing, his ability to kind of layer the football in, some of his touch. I do think he showed that in big moments, which for me kind of carries a lot of weight. So I was impressed, and I think he moved himself up a lot of boards with his performance in the college playoffs.
Yeah. You don't always get the opportunity to see those guys in big moments like that. And he was pretty composed and poised throughout it.
Made some really good throws. Yeah.
Yeah, I like Will Howard. Will is somebody who kind of like reminds me of that year Kenny Pickett had when he became like a first round pick in the 2022 draft. I don't think that's going to be the outcome from Will, but who knows? Like I didn't believe anybody was
that's the outcome for Kenny Pickett. So
yeah, I mean, well, Kenny Pickett's supposed to go in the top 10 that year, right? But like for Bo Nix, I didn't think that guy was going to go in the first round, or even Michael Penix. So who knows? Like, it doesn't take much for a team to fall in love with you and decide they need to take you there. But yeah, I like Will Howard. His draft positioning could be all over the place. Yeah. I could see him going early day 3. I could see him going late day 2. He can really fluctuate up across the board. The issue with Will, other than arm strength, is the velocity. Like, is he able to kind of rip velocity? Because he doesn't really drive the football that often. And sometimes it feels like he relies on a floater, kind of like a floaty football to kind of get in there. And I worry about that being a lot easier to stop at the next level. There's the Mac Jones element of this, right? Where like when you watch Mac Jones at Alabama, you're like, oh my God, this dude's accurate. He's on time and he's just on point here. But he's throwing to 3 NFL wide receivers. I mean, quite literally the same situation here for Will Howard, right? Like you're throwing to the best wide receiver I've ever seen at 18 years old. And in 2 guys who would also be some of the best wide receivers in college football if it weren't for the fact that they shared space with Jeremiah Smith. So there is that worry, right? Where he was a consistent 2,000-yard passer at Kansas State before he got to Ohio State, where the level of talent did jump up. What I do like about Will is that he's a decisive guy. He makes quick decisions, and he reads what the coaches tell him quickly, right? Like he gets there, he sees it, he processes it, he throws it. It's about how much of the field he can access. I think at worst, Will Howard's going to end up being a backup in the NFL for a long time. I think there's a chance he could be like a low-level starter in the league where it's like you could win games with him if you have enough around him, but you're always going to be looking to upgrade. So, yeah, I wouldn't mind getting that in the 3rd round or the 4th round,
Agreed. Yep. All right, Q. Let's do this. Your room as a whole, Abby. I think, I would be happy if Sam Darnold was their first option and Justin Fields was their second. I would feel pretty good about that going into this. So I do like your ideas there, and definitely Will Howard is just sneak peek. He was on my list of options in this draft if you're going to go later, for sure. So I like the idea. I do have the same concerns we already talked about Sam and Justin, to be honest, but you're going to have concerns with no matter who's here, really, at this point. So, thoughts on her room as a whole, Q?
I like Ab's room. I think Ab did a good job of like coming out with some pretty reasonable options here, right? Sam Darnold definitely going to be available, and then we're talking about other pieces that could eventually, maybe they give you a shot to be a bridge or to be something more than that, but it gives you the flexibility to go into 2025, 2026, 2027, being able to find your answer elsewhere other than like committing all your resources in the draft.
Great. Q, you're up, man. Let's hear it. You hear me? Did I mute myself?
No, I thought I could get the audio to come through my sound device and it didn't work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I thought he was frozen too. I was like, oh no.
I was like, no, you're up, Q. Your room. Let's hear it, man.
All right, my quarterback room. Now you could swap the guy I'm going to say to be the starter with probably the more likely answer, which is Kirk Cousins. But Matt Stafford, right? If you could get him for what would be maybe a day 3 pick and then a late day 2 pick, I think that would be a worthwhile package to get you a starter. There are questions about like if Matt would want to come to Cleveland and all of that, or if the Rams would sell him to him. And look, if you're looking into the reasons the Rams are trying to get rid of Matt Stafford, I mean, shipping him off to a place like Cleveland feels like something they would do.
Yeah.
If that's what's motivating the trade, right? So yeah, I think it'd be an interesting move. You can get Matt Stafford here because that is probably the best guy you can grab. Geno Smith, I don't think he's going to be available. I just don't think it's a realistic one. He probably would be somebody I would prefer over Matt, just like level of play wise. But Matt Stafford, you are going to feel like if you have a good enough team around him, you have a chance to do something special that season.
Yeah.
And there's going to be actual excitement around it, right? This is a guy who has the arm to get through cold weather football. He is very well equipped to run what Kevin runs. He's ran it a long time. Matt Stafford would make a ton of sense here as your starter. I keep going back and forth between like 8 different guys for who I would want to be the backup. So who I'm landing on this week is Kyle Trask, as that kind of backup with upside. I think I stole Brad's guy, as that backup with upside. He hasn't played. If you look into why he hasn't played, he got drafted while Tom Brady was still on the team. And then they have the open competition with Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield comes out, plays at a Pro Bowl level. He doesn't get an opportunity to play. So it doesn't feel like he's seen as damaged goods in Tampa Bay, which I think is good. So you give him a chance, former 2nd-round pick. He's going to be dirt cheap because he's a free agent, probably about league minimum or about $3 million for him, just to see what you can get out of him. And he could potentially come in if your older vet that you're going to have, your Kirk Cousins / Matt Stafford does not work out for you. Okay, you could put that guy in, see what you have. And then obviously at a certain point, you're just going to have to draft somebody in a different class. My third quarterback, so the guy I see as the DTR replacement, I usually go Will Howard here. Right, like that's where I usually land on with Will. You can replace Will with maybe like if you don't think Will's going to be there, like let's say you commit this much, right? You give up a 3rd and a 4th. I don't think you're going to be able to also grab Will Howard in that scenario. So now we're talking about that next tier of quarterback, right? I would say probably Dylan Gabriel would be the one that makes the most sense. Older, experienced guy. If he gets into a game, you're pretty sure he's not going to embarrass himself. Super limited size wise, right? He's 5'10", and I think that's putting it nicely. But still an experienced enough quarterback to where you could trust him if he had to get in an emergency situation in an NFL game. If you want to go somebody with a little bit more upside than that, maybe you go Tyler Shaw, right? Like we're talking about super late round guys here. I mean, Curtis Work is a bit old here, but somebody like that, right? Like you're gonna get some ancient 6-year senior to replace the DTR role. Or you're going to go after somebody like Cam Mueller or somebody like that who is an FCS guy. But, you're probably going to have to sacrifice what you would get in the draft at quarterback to be able to bring in Matt Stafford. I do think if you bring in Kirk Cousins, I think then it turns into Will Howard is the guy you go after to replace that DTR role. Or it might be that you trade for like a Joe Milton, right? Or something like that. So you know what? That's my answer. We're going to trade for Joe Milton, have him replace the DTR role. Kyle Trask is going to be the backup, and boom, we're starting Matt Stafford. And basically, that's going to be enough to where people are going to look at that and say, "Hey, Miles, you got to show up to work, man."
Yeah.
Like that's enough to where you can show up to work.
Yeah, the Matt Stafford of it all is really interesting to me because I don't think it's one I've considered as much because obviously he's not one of like the obvious available ones. But I think what you mentioned about him working with Kevin Stefanski is a really valid reason on why it would be good to give up, a little bit of draft capital if you have to bring him in. And I think it would put the ceiling of what this team could do higher than most of the other guys that we've mentioned throughout the course of this. Just obviously with the experience he's had in this league, the concerns obviously would be him staying healthy. He's had, a number of injury issues over the last couple of years, but I really like the upside there. It would give me a lot more hope than I think a lot of the other things that we have talked about. And I think it's a fair trade-off then to say, yeah, you're probably not going to be able to do as much in the draft, maybe taking a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick rather than going 3rd or 4th round.
Yeah, there's a number of guys in the draft. There's kind of like a cluster of them that are intriguing right there that, they have some upside. They're seeing, like you said, 5th-year seniors, whatever, that, are worth kicking the tires on. So, if it's not Will Howard and just the next tier down, I do think you're doing okay. You know what I mean? As far as replacing DTR, dude, if they could land Stafford, that would be the dream. I think that is the best outcome I've heard yet.
Yeah.
That I think is feasible. Like, I can't think of a better outcome. Maybe, and this is a tough one, but what's the kid's name in Green Bay? Malik
Wills.
Malik Wills is an interesting proposition as well. From watching him play, a couple games. So if he were traded for, that would also get me excited. But I think Stafford is, as far as a fit, I mean, it's perfect with Stefanski. So, I think it would agree with how you phrased it, Abby. It would raise the ceiling for the Browns in a major way.
Yeah.
How, if that outcome is in the realm of possibilities, I don't think we know yet, really, if they're going to move off of him. But I certainly think it's something the Browns should be on and interested in and on the phone about if it becomes a possibility.
Yeah, they should. I mean, like, again, this offseason, it's funny whenever, like, they get these reports, oh, yeah, Shador's meeting with the Browns, and somebody wants to tweet at me, oh, it looks like they're going to draft a quarterback, Quincy. How do you feel about this? You must be furious. I'm like, no, I want the Browns to do everything possible to make the decision on if they want to draft the quarterback or not, right? Like, they got to be 100% sure. So, they should do everything. They should be meeting with Shador. I expect them to meet with every quarterback they have in the top 100. Right, like they better meet with those guys, right? Like, just because I don't want to draft Cam Ward, don't mean I don't think they should bring him in on a workout. No, you got to be at their pro days and do all of that. And this is another part of due diligence, right? Hey, look, it might turn out that Matt Stafford don't want to come here, but you still got to do your due diligence, right? You still got to figure out, hey, can you get him? What would it cost to get him? What's the market looking like to get him? Because you're looking for really good short-term solutions at the quarterback position. That is one of the guys who gives you more of a guarantee. I mean, this is the only guy in the playoffs who threw for 300 yards against that Philadelphia Eagles defense that won the Super Bowl, right? So still playing at a very high level. He was throwing it like, Puka Nacua was really the only guy he had down there. And I think Puka left in the first half. So, this is a guy who's still playing football at a high level. And if you get him, then all of a sudden, we remember. It's like we forgot. We remember stuff like, hey, we almost did beat the Eagles with Deshaun Watson playing terribly, right? Like, we almost did beat a bunch of contending teams, even with Deshaun playing horrific football. And maybe, just maybe, if you don't have a horrific quarterback starting for you, the team's not that damn bad. Like, I don't know, maybe it's a wild theory, right? I know they got other problems, but maybe if the biggest problem on the team isn't the quarterback, then all of a sudden, the other flaws feel like they're less of a big deal. So that's, if I'm the Browns, you got to feel like you can flip this in an instant if you just get better quarterback play. And that's the best upgrade you can get, man.
Now you've got me picturing like David and Jerry Jeudy out there with Stafford. I'm getting like a little too excited now. I almost wish this thought wasn't even.
Oh, it'd be like Flacco-mania on steroids.
And I can't, like David and Matt Stafford together, that's a comment.
Do you know how like Detroit fans at like Piston games were just breaking out into Jared Goff chants?
Yeah.
That will be us at the ring ceremony for the Cavaliers, saying, "Let's go Stafford!" Like, because the Browns started off 3-1. Right?
Yep.
People are going to be like, it's basically like we have Baker again, is how the Browns fans are going to be.
Except for like this dude has an actual championship on his resume in a history of actual success in the league. So look, Jerry Jeudy would be out there super excited, right? Like David Njoku would be super excited. And it'd be interesting to see what Miles and his camp would do if that trade did come through, because now he looks justified because the Browns don't have a clear answer at quarterback. But you start to look more like a jackass if like they got Matt Stafford and then like people think they can compete and you're like, no, I don't want to play. And then it feels like, oh, he just don't want to be here. Right. Yeah. Which then completely changes the tone of how that's going to be covered, which is not going to be good for him. So
I think what you mentioned too about the front office, like kind of doing their due diligence on everything. Like if there's one thing we know about this front office, with all the criticisms that people have of them, they look into every single thing that is possible. They are calling about everything. So if this is the thought that has crossed their mind, they have been on the phone. And
every year there's a surprise trade, right? Like every year, like, oh, they got Amari Cooper, right? Yeah. Like, or the year after that, the Deshaun Watson trade kind of caught us off guard that happened. Jerry Jeudy trade just kind of like, we knew that was on the works, but when it happened, it's like, oh, that actually happened. Like that was, we thought that was in the works for a while, but then it just went away for a while. So every year they have made a trade to try to make this team better at a position that they have deemed critical.
Yep.
Quarterback is the critical position. And unless they go trade for a left tackle, I feel like that's where their efforts are going to be poked at. And I don't think it's likely that they could get Matt, but I don't think it is. It wouldn't break my brain if they were able to get him.
No.
So
it would make me really happy, though. That's for sure.
Imagine the difference of introductory press conference vibe from like him and Deshaun Watson's like first press conference.
Andrew Berry would be like so much more relaxed than he was in the
Andrew Berry and he will be there. This is gonna be Kevin like, so we got Matt.
Kevin's gonna be giving some lighthearted jokes again. It'll be all good.
Dude, he's gonna be talking about how he used to spank him when he was at Minnesota. Like Kevin gonna be out there just telling stories like, man, we're so happy to have him.
Opening up to the press and telling them everything. Yeah.
Right.
It would be
like,
wild.
I'm definitely calling the plays, y'all. Like
Oh, for sure.
My room is very, I guess it's chalky to start. I'll say that. I just went Kirk Cousins because I think it is the most likely outcome for them. They are gonna. I used you said this last week, and I forget if you said it on the air or not, or if it was off the air. But we were talking, and you said that if Andrew Berry can make it through this offseason, not take a quarterback at 2, and not trade Myles Garrett, he'll have balls of steel, right? Like to get through this offseason and not fall into the trap of both of those, you know what I mean? Things. And like, I feel like that's a real thing. That, there's this group of public out there that just wants to take a swing at any quarterback because they're at 2, right? And it's a bad process and they don't care. They just want a quarterback because quarterback can impact the team the most, right? So, and there's variance there. And I feel like that's why the public wants that. You know what I mean?
And let's be honest too, like about the dynamic of what's going on with the push for quarterback at 2. It's usually like what I've seen is it's people on the radio, people who do what I do for a living, right? They want the Browns to draft the quarterback at 2. And I think the reason behind it isn't like 100% this, but like a good chunk of it is, hey, people will at least be excited about the Browns again. Yeah. And right now people aren't excited about the Browns, right? And it's like you want, like I get that urge where I'm like, I need the Browns to do something to get people excited. But then you also have to balance that with like, hey, I actually want the team to be good. So like if they traded for Kyler Murray, people get excited, but I'm like, that's going to be devastating for the future. So that's just going to be something I have to pay for in 3 years. So I think a lot of just like people want this excitement. So they're pushing this idea to fans who also are craving some dopamine at the quarterback position. And the answer might be is like, hey, you might not want to get that day one dopamine rush because some of these guys that you can sign Aaron Rodgers and some people are gonna get that feeling, right? Oh, we got A-Rod, it's gonna work. And then 8 months later, you are hating the fact that you made that move, right? And wanting to fire everybody that made that move. So, I think there's a lot of short-term thinking going on at quarterback because people just want to feel better about quarterback because we felt not great about it from a moral standpoint for most of us, right? For the last 4 years. And now we don't feel great about it from a on the field standpoint. So it just feels unbearable.
Yeah. And the fact that they have the second pick, people are like, take the opportunity now, right? And it's hope. So taking quarterback is a ton of hope and that's a powerful thing. But process wise, I don't, unless they love them, and I don't love either of them, and I don't think the majority of people do. Well, maybe, I mean, some of the pundits do, but I don't think it's the right move. So I think ultimately you're gonna get Kirk Cousins because it makes just too much sense. It's the perfect match with Stefanski. I don't think he played well, partially because of his Achilles, so give him a little more recovery time. And I think he can provide you a level of play if you enhance the running game and, enhance the defense. You can win some games with him. And I think he gives you that answer. The guy that I also, that you stole from me, Quincy, well, didn't steal him from me, but the guy that I actually like for the backup spot is Kyle Trask because he isn't tainted as much as a lot of these guys. He has not had the opportunity because he lost the battle with Baker, right? And he's a big quarterback who I liked coming out of college with some upside that I think as a backup can fill that role, but also give you some upside hope. Like, you know what I mean? That maybe he could develop into something at some point. So I think he fills both of those roles at the same time, which is why I like Kyle Trask more than some other guys that are just retreads or whatever. And then in the draft, I like the idea of Will Howard. I like the idea of Kyle McCord. I kind of have them both slotted in the same kind of vein there. And even like Max Brosmer, I would even look at. He may go a little bit higher. I don't know. It's to each team's taste, but that group of quarterbacks right there, and I think I like Will the best. I'm with you guys there out of that group, but McCord is interesting for me too. After his season, and we'll be interested to see how these guys weigh and perform at the combine as well. So
I just can't get the taste of his 2023 Ohio State season out of my mouth.
I feel it, but I mean, he played really well this year.
He played well. He did. He was PFF's #1 deep ball thrower, with just wild irony there.
Wow,
right?
But, going through the 2024 film, he looks like a different player. So, so those guys, that would be my room. So I think it's going to be Cousins. I would like it to be Cousins. If it's not Stafford or Darnold, I think either of those are I would take Darnold or Stafford over Cousins. Let me be clear about this.
Right.
I just don't think they will happen, I guess. But I do think you guys both brought better options to the table than me. But I do think that after those options, Cousins would be the answer.
I think I'm with you too, that out of all of the options, Cousins is the most realistic for like what probable result is actually going to come of all of this. Like it just feels more possible. Obviously there's the fit there with Stefanski, which makes a ton of sense. I just have trouble at this point with how, I mean, he played poorly last season coming off of the Achilles injury and just, I don't know how much he has left in him in general, but I guess if you need a year out of someone, like that is still one of the more plausible options. This isn't, a long-term solution, which is hard to remember when you're, looking for these guys. It's like, the starter you might only need for a year. So I think it makes a ton of sense from all those perspectives.
And I think you got to separate his season a little bit too, because he was not that bad for the first whatever amount of games. It was like the last 6 where he was god awful. Go ahead.
And he also injured his shoulder in those last few games, right? So I think in the New Orleans game, right, when the tear started, he hurt his shoulder, or at least he says he hurt his shoulder, right?
Yeah.
So that might be a factor in it too. So and I have a hard time with this because it's like, if I think about it the same way with like, okay, you had success with Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco looked well done, like by the time he got to Cleveland. Yeah. And then it was able to work out because the fit, and he was able to get some confidence back. And I think that'd be a similar effect for Kirk Cousins, where I think he will be able to regain some confidence, be an offense that really does still fit him. And also he knows, at least for this year, he's definitely going to be the starter, right? Because it's not like they're going to be in a rush to put in Deshaun Watson anytime soon. So and it's not like Deshaun's going to be able to come back and play anytime soon. So I think for Kirk, this is an option that makes a ton of sense for him. I could see it making sense for Kevin. Trading Myles Garrett also factors into this, right? If they trade Myles Garrett before free agency, then all of a sudden we're like, all right, man, they might bring in Kyle Trask to start and see where it goes. And just like play the season out how it plays it out.
Doesn't even matter at that point. Right.
Yeah, because then you're going to have to start thinking about, okay, who else are you moving? Maybe not this year, but at the end of the year, right? So there's a lot to think about with the Browns quarterback room and how that could play out. Watch them do something we haven't even imagined.
Yeah, right. I like the Joe Flacco comparison, though, to Cousins, because I do feel like, obviously, Stefanski, out of many coaches, has excelled at kind of revitalizing those washed up type quarterbacks that you're like, they don't really have much left in them. And he, is very creative in the ways he is able to make those guys, find success. So I could see a world, where he is able to at least get the most out of him in Cleveland compared to going to other places.
Yeah. So we all got some crossover here with the all had Will Howard on our list.
I feel like Kevin's gonna go to Andrew if it comes down to it and says, "Hey man, you left me with Jameis last year. You owe me this."
Yeah, right. Honestly,
I need a personality fit because
I think he owes him for a couple other things too, not just the Jameis piece.
Yeah.
I know. Well, I'm like, I just look at the personality fit, and I'm like, I remember when they did it. I was like, I understood why they did it, but I was like, boy, I've never seen a worse personality match than Kevin and Jameis Winston.
Makes no sense.
I know Kevin just be in that office sometimes. It's like,
I believe every single rumor that said that those two were not meshing in that way. I believe all of them.
Especially because he gave up the play calling the day Jameis was the starter. And then took it back right after the end of the season, and not just took it back, told us that he took it back. And I was like, okay, he didn't want to do something, right? So I feel like at the very least, you're probably going to end up with Kirk Cousins or something like that, because I don't think Kevin's trying to deal with it no more. He's like, nah, man.
Like, I can work with this.
You owe me this. I at least like Kirk. That's all I'm saying. Like, I don't even know.
Give me somebody I can work with.
I like that dude, right? Like him or Joe Flacco, like one of those two go. Him, Joe Flacco, Jacoby Brissett. I promise you this right now. One of those three guys are going to end up on this team, right? Because he's just going to want one of them.
Yeah. Jacoby's another one we didn't bring up, but I could see being in the realm of a backup, that they choose to bring in for sure.
Yeah. As a backup, I can deal with it. I can't.
Yeah, not the starter, I don't think.
But because we saw that movie and it didn't, although Jacoby played good football, they didn't win a lot of games.
Yeah.
So. All right, guys. Great job as usual. Assignment accomplished. Some crossover there with Will Howard, the Kyle Trask. I did not expect that from you, Q, but we're on the same page there. So, we can get on the Trask bandwagon.
The trash bag.
The trash bag Trask. But well done, guys, as always. And keep watching the OBR for everything as the draft gets closer, the combine gets closer, free agency gets closer, and, of course, the Myles Garrett trade looms out there every day as we will, the insiders and all of the writers and us over here at the streaming network will provide you news and entertainment every week and every day. So keep it locked at the OBR. For Quincy Carrier, Abby Mueller, my name is Brad Ward. This has been another edition of Things I Think I Know About the Browns. Have a great weekend.